Yeah, it's on here. It's on. Okay. Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and we want to welcome you to the show today. It's going to be an unusual show right now because I am actually on the way to the hearing, taping the hearing for Stefanie Lambert and Stephanie Scott. But we wanted to get going this morning. I hope everybody's having a great week. We are having a weird week. I can tell you that here at Brandenburg News Network. But we're going to go ahead and Liberty Essentials right now with Bill Mohr and Karen the Riveter, and Ralph the IT guys here. So how you doing this morning, guys?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing good. It was a little rough start to the day, and last night I wrote a little bit about it on my Telegram channel. But you know what? You can't keep a good woman down.
Yeah, that's all we can do is persevere.
Yep, I saw that, Donna, and I'm sorry for what you're going through, but you are one of the most resilient people I know.
Well, thank you. It's like I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened. I think we need to talk about mental illness because I have listened to people talk about this who really have no experience in it. And I'm quite honestly, I'm pretty disgusted with the snowflakes that come out of college with the social degrees and such with how they handle things. Unless you've actually lived it with somebody that you are around 24/7 and you can't get away from it because you can't leave them, people don't honestly really have a grasp on how taxing it is to be around someone who is truly mentally ill. So last night they changed my daughter. She's my adopted daughter. She's my youngest daughter. We adopted her from India years ago, and I probably should talk about this at length some point in time, but she has a closed head injury. Her head was smashed in a train accident, and her mother died at her side, and she ended up going to an orphanage for a period of time. She was in there for actually quite a while, and anyhow, it's kind of a God story on how I found her and how we ended up adopting her. So anyhow, we adopted her, and they did a decent amount of lying to us on how damaged her head was and how bad it was. Well, anyhow, as time progressed, she was barely conscious or in control of herself when we got her. I mean, she was listless. She couldn't hear. She couldn't see. She couldn't hear. One of her eyes had dropped back into her skull. We had some surgery done on her. They took a plastic surgeon took a rib out to rebuild her facial structure because it was so damaged. So I mean, we're not talking a minor injury here. We're talking horrific injuries. When we got her, she had worms crawling out of her and boils all over her body. And carrying her out of India to get her back here to the United States where there was actual help, I was literally puke head to toe because she was so sick. So our family has really been through it with her. And so here we get this child that, you know, I'm going to tell you right now that I told God for 6 months that he'd made a mistake in me being her mom. And then after about 6 months, I realized why be in our family. And the reason being is because I am the ultimate bullhead on the planet. I don't give up on anyone or any situation until all avenues are explored, or until we come to the last moment, right? And so they changed her meds on her a couple of weeks ago, and it has had catastrophic consequences. So last night was kind of the probably the end of our med. And we can't give her really any more meds, because if they do, it literally will damage her liver and her body, and she's dying anyway. I can honestly tell you that I have had the solemn duty to stand with somebody who I deeply love, my daughter, and know that I get to watch, and I have been watching my daughter basically die for the last 12 years. It's a degenerative disease. They can try to stave it off for as long as they can with the meds that we have, but there's no cure for this. And it's palliative care right now, where we're doing our best that we can to keep her together, and honestly keep her out of the system with the abysmal system and the non-existent help within the system. And so, she's in a really good situation. She's got 24/7 care around her. She's got her own emotional support dog, and it truly is the emotional support dog. She's 28 years old. Mentally, on a good day, she's somewhere between 3 and 5. And last night, she got to the point where it was that we have ability probably of dealing with her. I don't even know if they are going to be able to get her stabilized if she goes to a hospital at this point. Bad it is, and it's been bad for many, many years. I mean, if I tell you the whole story, you guys would probably be really shocked, because we think, and what we've been told or sold by me, that mental illness is depression and such. So that's part of it. But true mental illness that gets to the point of psychopathic is something that nobody really understands. It's nobody's fault. It's absolutely no one's fault when this happens. And the families, when she's under a psychiatrist's care for the degree of meds that she's on, and I'm going to tell you, the first thing they ask us when we go into her appointments, her psychiatrist says, he looks at our family and says, how are you guys coping with this? And we've had from the beginning of when she really had a break from reality. I mean, a total break from reality. The doctors have told us, we never thought your family was going to be able to cope with it. In fact, she's so mentally ill, we don't even know where we would put her. And if you can cope with it and keep her home, it's the best case scenario for her, because the situation. So when people talk about mental illness, and I'm going to tell you what, when I hear a social worker talk about it, I want to tell them to shut the hell up, because they've never lived it. They walk into these situations, they think they know everything, but they get to go home at the end of the day and leave the families with the disastrous wrecks that quite often they leave behind, because they're unaccountable for what they say and what they do. And there's so many families that have been destroyed by the way that mental health is involved in people's lives. Now, I'm in a good situation because we have been blessed to have the resources to actually take care of her. And just so everybody knows, we get no assistance from anyone, and it probably costs me about $100,000 a year to be able to keep her at home rather than in a facility. And my heart it absolutely breaks. I mean, I did the same thing for my dad before he died. We kept him home as long as we could, until he started jumping out windows and breaking glass. And that happens when somebody has dementia. People have no idea because they generally ship people off that are either mentally ill or have dementia into facilities to take care of them. But when you're on the ground taking care of people with true mental illness, dementia, or true psychopathic mental illness, it's a whole new ball game. And I feel uniquely qualified to talk about this because she's been with us now for about 25 years. And I can the stories I can tell and the implication and what truly our family's been through trying to help her has been not only a Herculean task, but gives us a unique perspective to really understand what families go through on a daily basis who have kids that have say autism, or I've got a friend who has Down syndrome, and they kicked them. My one friend who has a grandson, and the mom are friends with both of them. Son was kicked out of school the other days, Down syndrome, and these kids cannot control themselves or their reactions. So like for my daughter, we really can't bring her out in public because she frightens people. When you see somebody who's lost a limb instead of like half their brain, people don't register that there's a problem with someone who has mental illness, but not a physical indication of that. Mental illness is that because it was trained as an amputee, some physically disabled, and people laugh. True minutes together, all of a sudden they'll look at that person to find a reason to fit in what they know and can't. And it's something that no one knows where to deal with because for a number of reasons. And I could talk about this for a very long time, but I can tell you guys all, I had a huge plan on how to deal with this to help families that I know, and I know how much suffering there is out there, not only for those who are receiving no mental health services, real ones, and for the families that are around them. There's nothing out there. And so this is one of the reasons why you look at what happened to Liliana Rose, and I'll be testifying in her hearing tomorrow because she was literally kidnapped by CPS in Tennessee. She has scars all over her body because they're trafficking her within the system. And it happens all the time. They'll try to take kids out of family. They get about $1 million a kid for pulling kids out of families. Allegan County in the state of Michigan is one of the worst counties for it in the entire state. They literally have literally legal kidnapping going on, and they're trafficking kids. CPS loses 850,000 kids a year in the system, and their outcome is not good at all. And every politician is in on this. They know that there's a problem and they refuse to deal with it. And so thereby their silence, they are complicit.
Yeah, that's been going on for a long time. That was proven that the state is actually the leader in child trafficking. The government is the one that's funding it. They're the ones that put it up. It's nothing that is just handled by the people alone, but it's actually a giant organized crime.
It is, and I'm going to tell you right now, the stuff that I saw with the DNR up in, because I've got a bird's eye view of quite a few things in the state, and the fact that it should be real indicative to everybody out there that I had a complete tour of Grayling. There's reasons for that, and the connections that I have are pretty amazing. And not everybody or anybody can walk onto that camp. I'm going to tell you what it is. The state owns all of that land. That's state-owned land. It's not military. They have made this a military issue so that the state can grab more land, and they are controlling not only the waterways, but $4.6 million or 4.6 million acres of state-owned land. And I'm going to allege right now, because we need an investigation, that the DNR is involved in trafficking children because they've got the perfect cover for it.
Yeah.
And when you see whose lands back up to it, it's all the oligarchs back up to the state-owned land. They can get all kinds of things moved in and out of that state-owned land. And so Grayling, people don't understand what's really happening up in Grayling. And I'll tell you what's happening up in Grayling, because they want to be like, get everybody on the side of the DNR. We need to protect the land. The DNR is clear cutting up there and leaving an environmental disaster as they're pilfering. It's the DNR that's pilfering our minerals and our natural resources, and they're not restoring the land. They're clear cutting it. They are not logging. If they were responsible, they would be logging and replanting. No, they're clear cutting it and leaving the land a scorched earth. And I mean, there's not one thing growing on it. They're destroying it. The amount of damage to the land for soil erosion, and we work in one of the companies that I own. We work in the areas of say, environmentals. We have to deal with environmental quality on all of our jobs and such, and we have to do complete restoration. This is not happening with the EPA, and it's not happening with the DNR, because they are weaponized industries by the state. And the head of the Department of Natural Resources is appointed by who? The governor, Gretchen Whitmer. They're all lockstep. And also, it's the same thing with the police situation, the state police, but also the city police. We've got a bunch of Marxist mayors that were placed. They're Soros puppets. Rosalind Bliss from the city of Grand Rapids. You want to know why BLM ran roughshod over this state and the country? Look at the mayors that are put into place, and watch who's funded their campaigns, who's funded them, and they get to appoint the all these appointments, the chief of police and the chief of police in the state, in the city of Grand Rapids, because I know the cops there. I know some cops, and they were told to stand down in the stairwells while they ransacked the city. This is exactly what's going on here. And all of these organizations, or these not unconstitutional entities, they are all tied in together. Make no mistake about it. And it's not just, it's like, you look at the trial of President Trump, the rightful president of the United States. This is really all about, if they can do it to one person, they can do it to all of us. If they can grab kids out of families, and most families don't have the resources or the ability to fight it. They grab the kids and they go to especially low-income areas where people can't fight, and they don't have the resources, they don't have the connections to fight it, and quite honestly, they quite often don't even know what's the first step to take. And it is a disaster. It is a shame. It's an embarrassment, not only for the state, but for every single citizen of the United States of America, because we've been lulled to sleep and are so busy. Most people are so busy playing and having, I've got the right to have this. I've got the right to have this or that. I have the right to have all this time to do what I want. Nobody has that. Our time is given by God Almighty. Our effort is given by God Almighty. Our time and our possessions, our money, we're only stewards of God's world. We don't own any of it. And every single one of us should be laying every minute of our day, our effort, our voice, our time at the feet of God Almighty, and say, I'm willing to do whatever it is you ask me to do. I don't care if I'm up all night, like I was last night. And I'll tell you what, Stefanie Scott, I'm going to be covering the hearing. I posted those things that I wrote, and sitting in the dark, sitting there going, not sad for the world. I'm sad for the entire world. I'm not sad for me. I'm not sad for my daughter. I'm sad for all of us. And anyhow, she responded praying after I posted it. And I called her, and we sat up and we talked on the phone for quite a while last night, because she's facing going into this hearing today too, which I will cover today, as long as they don't kick me out. They keep trying to kick me out. They kicked me out of Liliana's hearing, and I was the first one they kicked out. And then they kicked out every single other person there because they don't want any witnesses to what they're doing in their child trafficking that's going on in the States. They don't want witnesses. And so, you know, I'm going to be there. I'm going to try to make sure that I can get in and tape from inside, but it's a crapshoot because these people are trying to cover their tracks, and they're all guilty. Every one of them. They've committed treason. They are committing crimes against humanity, and every single one of them needs to be prosecuted for this. There is no answer from these people because they're parasites.
Yeah, and you touched on something that we brought up numerous times here is all these agencies that are involved, they have all began lawlessly, right?
Yes.
They don't hold any legal authority to exist over the American people. They may only hold what authority is given to them as a department under the executive branch, but they hold no authority over the people themselves. And as soon as they exercise such things, they have usurped their purpose, and they're already de facto at large, right? There is no delegated authority for these agencies to exist. So if we expect them to follow the law under this republic, because that's what we're governed by law. If we expect that from them, we're expecting what right?
We're expecting what? Say that again.
Any government official that begins the office in a lawless manner, you can only expect that the entire tenure of that person or agency is going to be lawless. And that's a big problem we have here.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, I had a real interesting day yesterday. I have a very, very good friend who has worked in like several administrations in the White House. He's worked with many administrations, very connected. And he called me and he said, "Hey, I've got somebody I want to introduce you to." And this is going to go further because people think they know what's going on in the world, and they don't. I don't care who anybody is, and I'm included in this. There's so much lying going on out there and narratives coming from both sides of the aisle, both sides, because, you know, and I mean, we were told that a long time ago. We know that we have disinformation and misinformation coming out from both the good guys and the bad guys. Because if the good guys spill the beans, the bad guys are going to know, and they're going to know exactly how to go after it in an attack to take things down. And if anybody says that they know, I listen to all these fake anons that are out there that are leading people astray. And believe me, you know, believe me, that sort of thing. And it's like they are only building audiences. They're literally patriots in a PAY. They're in it to make money. A patriot that is in it to honestly to bring back the United States will serve this country without pay. And that would be your first clue that there's no dog in the fight here. And everybody on BNN does it for free. I ain't paying anybody to get on here. Either they want to be on here because they want to save the nation, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to do so, or I don't want to really necessarily have a whole lot to do with them. Now, I have had people on that have made careers out of what they're doing. I get it. Some of them are audience builders, but when they come on BNN, there's no payment involved in it. And so, because I would like to talk to everyone, whether they're, because you can find things out even by the people that are in the system. You know, it's like I've talked to Pete Hoekstra online, and Pete Hoekstra has committed treason. He signed the Patriot Act not once but twice. And so if I were hardline and didn't talk to anybody, I'd kick them all out, because every single one of them has committed crimes against the United States, treason, and crimes against humanity. There's been, you know, that are in the establishment. Most of the people that come on BNN are actually true patriots that fight without any funding. And that's how I know I give people more credibility. But with that said, I've also talked to people on the, you know, on not so good side, and I find that to also be profitable, not because I'm listening to everything that to say. I'm listening for the lies. I'm listening for, okay, I'm calling bullshit on this, because even if I have to call them out on it and say, say something against what they are proposing or whatever, which I've had a couple people on that I have basically, one in particular, eviscerated online, because what he was proposing was only something that that was going to benefit himself and or the side that's going to tear this nation down.
A big issue that we have here, and I think all of us can agree, and Donna, you and I know this specifically coming out of Utah a couple weeks ago, is that we don't have unity among the people. We don't even know. Most people don't even know where they stand or why they stand there.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest issue we have is unity, and I mentioned it just a little bit ago that we are a republic. We're founded on laws, right? And the laws are what secure our liberty, right? It's the justice, the judgments through the law that secures our liberty. And a lot of people, they have a lot of ideas when they go into certain circumstances and start talking about certain things, but they don't hold to the law. And if you're not willing to hold to the law, then everything is just a biased opinion based on how you see it, what your worldview is, right?
Mm-hmm.
George Washington said the unity of government, which constitutes you one people, is all.
Lost you there, Bill. What's going on? Am I on or off?
There we go. I came back.
Okay,
He
good.
says it's justly so, for it is the main pillar in the edifice.
Okay, they don't want us talking about this because Bill keeps blinking on and off for me.
Prosperity of that very liberty which you so highly prize. It is going to take unity of the people to make these actions work and to make these solutions fit, right? And it's not just the people, it's not just the government. We see this disunity among every organization that we deal with on a daily basis.
Yep.
And everybody's going to have their own side, their own small beliefs, and there will never be perfect agreement on everything. And that was the very foundation of America. If you look all the way back into the debates in the Constitutional Convention, we'll understand that, because it was a multifaceted issue, and each colony saw things slightly different based on what was going on. But the unity was that because of the transgression of the law by the king and his military forces and parliament, because of that transgression, they became unified together for the cause to separate and become independent of their once governing bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that unification was based on what? The Declaration made it very clear. Let me just pull this up here. When they said that it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which what? The laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Right? That is the unity. If we can get people that understand that is the premise, that's the foundation of everything that we do, is based on the law, right? Whether that be common law or constitutional law, not case law. Things like that have never existed in America. If that becomes our foundation, we can attack all of these issues one at a time in unity. It doesn't matter if we have slightly different opinions on other matters. That should be the main goal of everybody.
Well, and what this, and people might say, what does this look like? Well, we don't even, because we haven't seen it in our lifetimes. I'm 60 years old. We've been in a civil action jurisdiction situation and a de facto government from before any of us were born. And the system has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and has usurped their rights. There's a usurpation of power. That was never intended. They are considering us property and our children property. They have a bang up job at brainwashing people into parody narrative. We have so little knowledge on what's going on right now. What's really going on? We can study it. We can go to the point of researching and such. But honestly, we need to go back to, as you always say, Bill, what worked, and what was the count? What was founded on? Which when the people say, our country's going to turn into a communist country. Guess what, everybody? News flash. We're already there. When you see how many people, I published some statistics, and I'm talking on my headphones right now as I drive. That's why I'm doing the hands-free broadcast right now, and I'm not looking at the screen or anything like that. When you look at where we are right now, and I can look it up because the statistics for how many people, and this is of the entire $11 million or 11 million population of the state of Michigan. It's a little more than that actually now, because we've got all the illegals that have also come in here. When you look at the population that works for the state, it's over 800,000 jobs. Now, when you take all of the elderly and retired out, and you take all the kids out, the people who are unable to hold jobs, disabled and such, whatever and such, I'm sure more
Break it up,
that are
Donna.
working. Even if you took the entire population, you're talking at least 10% is our government. You probably for a job, and or add in the government contractors on top of that, we could be 50% or more. And that doesn't include the people who are getting public assistance. So
I'd like to ask Bill a question. I've heard a tipping point kind of number at being somewhere around 10-11% of the public being awake and aware and willing. At the time of the Revolutionary War, supposedly 3% were willing to fight, and a total of somewhere around 10% were willing to contribute, support the effort in some way. And so I'm wondering if you've heard that too. And secondly, you mentioned the idea that all of the organizations are having trouble within themselves, not being unified. And I've seen that too. I've witnessed it. I've been a part of that. It's everywhere. And I think that what we're going to have to see is not a quote unquote grassroots organizations that are going to make a difference here. It's not going to be Stand Up Michigan. It's not going to be an assembly. It's not going to be a church group. It's not going to be a political party group. It's going to be a bunch of individuals standing on their own that I think are going to have to turn this around.
I
and
agree
it
with you
doesn't have to be an
100%.
organized entity.
I agree 100%
Yeah, well,
because every single
all
entity
politics,
has been infiltrated.
yeah, all politics begin where? It begins right in the home. It begins with our education. What we have been taught, what we are teaching ourselves, what we are listening to, what are we holding to truth, and what we are teaching our children. Right.
Yep.
That is the base of all politics in America. The base of all politics around the world. Right. It's who we give our allegiance to in our knowledge. And that is a huge downfall in America because as we see it, I mean, look back the last 3 years. It's saddening to see what they did to the kids in the public indoctrination camps, right? That we know as public schools. Just that fact alone, what was done to them, the irreparable damage that they're going to live with the rest of their life based on that.
Yeah.
What was done to their communities, what was done to their local businesses. I mean, I just got an email from Gretchen Whitmer yesterday saying how she's promoting small business. You know, this whole big agenda now. And I forget what all the details of it, but it was basically this large scale support of small business. And there were very few comments that were left that were actually reminding the people of, hey, back in 2020, do you remember you destroyed all the small business and local communities? Not all, but a lot of it, right? And so to see what they have done and then to continue people who are willing to send their kids right back into those camps. I mean, I look at it and say, this is a lot. You know, you take this back into the Holocaust era, and this would be like the adult Jews and Russians and Poland, the people from Poland. I don't know what you call them, Polonites.
Polish.
Yeah, the Polish. It would be like the adults of them coming out, getting back to life, and then allowing their kids to go back in behind them. Right? That is what we're seeing. And it's a little far from unity, but what we're talking about is stripping our posterity of the knowledge it takes to prevent the problem again, right? We can have problems, we can come up with solutions, we can fight through the issues, but wouldn't it be better if we understood how these things work through history and we prevent it before it ever starts?
Well, absolutely. And we need to go back to law and order, but also being able to communicate with each other. The communication skills of people is absolutely horrifically lacking.
I
Go ahead.
I agree with Bill. I think it's two great points. How they've attacked the family and why, number one. And two, why are people still wearing masks? Why are people sending their kids back to school? And we can see, I think some of these things are a measurement. They are a way that we can measure the progress of the critical thinker in our country. There are people who come to it naturally. I think the three of us here have a natural ability, but it is also educated over time. My ability to think critically, think outside the box, look from the 10,000-foot view, like I say, has been dramatically increased in the last few years. And it's been aided by people like you. And that's fantastic. So as that grows, we're going to see less people participating in the public school system as one. Another measure, how many kids are being vaccinated now? That's different. There are a lot of things that I see, whether we would see it as a positive or a negative number, or not a good enough number. I think they're a good measurement of where we are as a whole society for learning. And you're absolutely right. If we cannot understand how things work, we can't prevent it again. And I think that's why this is dragging out. It feels like it's taking forever. And when you read the Declaration, as you were quoting from earlier, and remember the history that I've shared previously, they made a declaration 10 years before they got to the point of the Declaration of Independence. Their evils were sufferable for a whole decade until they said no. So we're short of that. All these people that are learning and we're awake, we're really frustrated that it's taking everybody else so much time, but we have to have them on board. We have to have them at least what we call awake so that they can build their understanding. And the more time goes on, the more we are collectively learning what we need to learn in order to prevent it from happening again. My experiences in the last year or two alone have taught me a lot about the values that the founding fathers had strived for and why they put those things in the documents. Due process, freedom of speech being two that are very important to me because I've experienced those things personally. I've been in the school boards, I've been in the assembly, I've been in places where I expect that people should know this stuff, and I'm shocked at how little they know or how little they're able or willing to stand up for it. When I'm like looking around like, what's the matter with you guys? Come and join me. And later people will say quietly to me, I'm so glad you said that. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but why weren't you there with me? Why did you join me? Why wasn't you one of the 50 or 1,000 who were jumping up at the same time saying the same thing? Because we are not all made as fighters. We're not all made to be quick thinkers, and it takes everybody a long time to build that collectively, that ability to think critically and learn what we have to learn. So I think that's where the struggle is coming from. But that's why I think we need a tipping point to make things better to a point where we can continue to make things better. I yield.
Yeah, and that tipping point will come sure enough because they're not stopping. When I say they, I mean those who assume unlawful authority in government. They're not going to stop. The more apathy that they see from the American people, the more complacency they see from the businesses, as we saw it during the pandemic. They're going to re-engage as a strategic plan, and apparently my internet's in and out. But they're going to continue coming after the people, whether that be the exact same avenue or something similar. It's up to us to keep our eyes open, our ears open, and pay attention to the landscape of what's going on, so that we can actually see the horizon, we can see the finish point where we need to be, and we need to all work towards getting there. Everyone can do something, but nobody can do everything, right? So it takes hands, and it doesn't take a majority, as we know from history. It only takes, as Samuel Adams said, the tireless minority that are willing to set brush fires in the minds of men. That should be the main goal, along with our actions, the things that we have to go out and do. Like Donna's on her way out to this hearing. That is a huge thing. That I hope that gets aired everywhere it can, and I'm looking forward to the video, because that needs to be presented in the public's eye so that they can actually see what's going on and see what
Well,
they're.
I did it last week at the arraignment, and quite honestly, Craig Mauger was there from the Detroit fake press, and there was another guy from fake Fox 47 that was there, and they were horrible to Stefanie Lambert. They tried to corner her, and I got it on film and such. So they aren't there for the truth. They're there to destroy the lives of anyone that's fighting for this nation. And so it is important. We've got to get the information out, and everybody with a phone. It's like doing Brandenburg News Network. Yeah, okay, I've got a lot of technical expertise, you know, myself as well as people around me. But what is important is everybody's got a phone. Use it and document this stuff and then get it out there. I mean, I'm going to tell everybody, you give it to me, I'll put it on Brandenburg News Network. We'll get this thing out there so that people can see what's going on and everybody can. Go ahead, Bill. I think we lost Bill
Oh,
again.
I missed the last part of your statement there, but yeah, that's the key is everybody needs to be willing to share information. And I'm horrible with that. I'll be the first one to tell you when it comes to sharing things online, social media. I'm awful, right? I'll get on social media and I might see one or two things that I would just share with my little group, but I absolutely hate sitting there and going through everything that's going on because a majority of what happens on modern day social media is just it's just ridiculous. Not only the amount of censorship that's happening for the truth, but the amount of complaining and what I call whining. I actually wear a pin. I don't know if you've seen it, Donna. When I do wear suits to more formal occasions, I have a pin on my suit that actually has no whining on it. And a lot of people ask me about that. I tell them I don't wear that because I have children. I've got 4 kids, right? I don't wear that for them. I expect a little bit of whining from them because they don't know how to solve certain things, right? I train them to be critical thinkers and be able to solve, but I expect a little bit from them. What I don't expect is for adults to do it. And the definition of whining, I say, is complaining about a problem without proposing a solution. If we haven't thought through something long enough to be able to come up with a solution, whether successful, good, or not, then I don't think we have a right to sit there and complain about it. It is the solutions that we need to bring forth, not just the complain about what's going on. Elsewise, everything we do just becomes a big echo chamber, and everybody repeats the same things and goes home and then doesn't take any action.
And that's where you get the "we need to do something" thing happening, where people are out, we need to get that governor out of office. Okay, well, what are you doing about that? What are you going to do to make that happen in a lawful way, of course? You know, what are we going to do? We can't do anything unless we fix the election. Well, what are you doing to solve that problem? Look around you. There's a bunch of different people working really hard on that. They could use your help.
Yeah.
No kidding.
But I do get that on the local level, especially, let's say township, Michigan, when you have a complaint, you might not have a solution because you haven't been educated, and you just don't have a clue where to begin. And so people will complain, but is it a question? Does it come in the form of a question? Like I'm sure you're teaching your kids. Hey, Dad, what can I do to solve this problem? That's different than saying, Dad, I have a problem. And that our society has all been taught the latter, where we're just complainers and whiners, and we expect the government to solve our problem. And then we complain when they don't, but we don't ever do anything about it. The evils are sufferable. And that drives me crazy. But that's what we've been kind of trained to do.
Well, look
Yeah,
at we're all like hypersensitive, you know, Bill, Karen, Ralph, we're all hypersensitive to the injustices. We hate them. You know, it's not a mild annoyance. It is complete disgust and hate for the crimes that have happened in the United States against, you know, against all of us, because we're, you know, we're supposed to be one American family, and you should have the mindset of defending your family and you know, standing together and defending your family. We do that, and that's our mindset, and all of us hate what we're seeing. And so we just gotta hope and pray to God that he gets the other people so sick of this nonsense that's created by our government that the army of those actually doing something enlarges.
Right. It was kind of interesting. Yesterday, I was researching a DNR, and I mentioned something to my husband, and he's like, "Why do you even bother with that?" I said, "Because it's interesting." And he said, "Why is it interesting? It doesn't affect you. Like, what is it about? How does it enter your life?" And I just said, "Well, you like other subjects that, but I like this subject right now. I'm interested in it." And that's what I do. I research things. Like, he doesn't like his memories of college. I'm like, I liked that. So I'm researching this, and I'm finding things that I have more questions about. And I posted some to Donna yesterday, not knowing what she was experiencing. But what is it about MCL codes that I may not know, that I'm finding a discrepancy in there? And I think the government's trying to hide something, but I can't prove that yet because I might be missing a fact. And so I'm trying to figure out, is there something that I'm missing that I just don't know and I need to learn yet? And, is the clear cutting the problem, or is there a human trafficking issue? What is the issue? You don't know unless you start investigating who's in charge of the DNR. It all comes back to the governor, and based on what I could find, that was Granholm. But did it start before Granholm? So I have some more research I want to do.
Changed all the laws, and it was sort of like she said she had complete power to change all of the policies and procedures. And it looked to me like, when I was reading it, even went into MCL and just kind of changed things and that's what she did. And she just wrote the laws. It was sort of like what Brader did with kicking myself off the ballot the first time, was that they were just making up policies on the fly. They were doing whatever they wanted to. There was no checks and balances. Now the DNR has absolutely no checks and balances, uncontested power. They can arrest without a warrant. They can go on your property.
You're breaking up again, Donna.
Okay, I'm probably driving through low coverage area. They can come on and seize your land without a warrant, and you ain't going to get it back. You would end up having to go to court to get that land back, which is how the state's doing some of their land grabs. Think about that. So if we say it's not our problem, maybe it's not right now, but the farther that line moves, the more it's going to be everyone's problem, because this will devolve into the horror stories that we've heard in regimes of the past to a degree. Right now, we've got an oligarchy running it. That's historically what Russia had, right? And some of the others, but they typically will go into a single tyrant dictator from that. It doesn't stay there because there's too many people fighting for power.
Yeah, one of the questions I have on that section I shared with you was, it appears that she codified law via executive order. And I don't know, that's one of the questions I have, if I've missed something. And maybe I'll send that to you later, Bill, to look into. If that's the case, like, how unlawful is that? Like, and the way it was expressed in written is different. And there's another code law that's missing, that usually, if you have a law that becomes outdated, let's say, or whether it's updated or replaced or just done away with, it will remain in the public search system, so that you can go online and look up that code law, and it'll tell you, yes, in fact, it did exist at such a point in time, but this is what happened to it. And it might just be a little minor blurb. It might not give you the original documents, associated with it, but it will usually tell you why it's not there. When they are referring to a code law that gives them authority to do something, but that code law is not found in the system, that's another reason for when I ask questions. And there's some more public searching that I can do online to find the answers. And then there's some searching that we might have to do through like a FOIA, and they can, prevent us from actually getting, lawful answers because they're really crafty at that. But that's where it starts. And you have to have people like us who learn about doing that by doing it, so that we can spot the inconsistencies and when and how is the government trying to hide things from us.
Yeah, and that's a big issue I've always had on the legislative search here in Michigan. Even something as simple as when they repeal a law, what do they do in the MCL search? They remove the law text in its entirety and just put repealed and when it was repealed. That's a big issue for the people because I want to know why it was repealed, what it said, what was the outcome of it. Because there are a lot of things, and I don't know when that changed because I remember looking up some prior laws that were repealed and being able to see them. So I'm not sure when that had all changed, but that's a huge way to hide knowledge from the public, and that's
Too.
what was that, Donna?
That's absolutely what they're doing, because when you see the language changing in all of this, and they're just making it up on the fly, and then the way that the state website and websites that they're associated with the departments and such work, it is almost impossible to find that information. Now the silver lining here, and this is why AI is such a big deal. AI actually helps you find this stuff and find it quick, the things that they're hiding. I believe that they're trying to make people afraid of AI because they know if they I'm going to qualify this. They know that if we have unmoderated AI, it's going to tell the truth, and they don't want that out there. What we have to get away from is the moderated AI in most of the models that we have out there, like chatbot and what's the other one? It starts with a CL, Claude, that are out there. Those are all modified, and they're either owned by Microsoft or Amazon. Okay, so they are having the same mechanism for moderating them that Facebook has, and some of the other things. So they can craft the narrative by censoring and pushing certain issues. Now, if we have AI that is not moderated, now you've got the truth out there. And quite honestly, we're working on an AI model. You guys all know that I have a tech company, and we are working on an AI model that's non-moderated and decentralized. They should be scared out of their mind of this because it gives us the same tools they have.
Yeah. So Karen had just posted something. We were just talking about that, where the executive orders from the governor seem to codify the laws. And I wanted to touch on that a minute because you brought up an executive order from a specific statute regarding general powers and duties of the Environmental Protection Act. And this was done in 2009 by executive order.
Right.
And it goes through, I mean, it is very lengthy.
Yes.
It refers to numerous statutory laws and sightings, and goes through all, probably not all, but a lot of what the Department of Agriculture, Civil Rights, Community Health, Corrections, Human Services, Department of Natural Resources, Management, and Budget. I mean, it touches on all of them in one executive order. Very complex. And this was done specifically to redirect the department's guidance from the executive branch, right? However, as we touched on earlier, The executive department in this case in 2009 was pushing for the departments to do or not to do certain things, but what was stated in that executive order, a lot of it was unlawful because they don't have the authority to do it.
Right.
So what you're saying is correct, that the executive order, and we saw this over the last several years too, the executive orders were used in a way to create laws through departments, right? And they're not
Yeah.
laws, they're policies. And
Yeah.
they expect they expect the people of Michigan here to be dumb enough to actually believe that they have to abide by it because it was directed through a department that exists, right? And it's not overly complicated, but if you don't know these things, if you don't know who has the authority to do or not to do regarding law, then it can get very confusing as to what am I supposed to obey here? What am I supposed to subject myself to? And it can be plainly stated that you are to subject yourself to your own family guidance, to the supreme authority over you, that being God, and then to the law that is established and given to us by those who came before us, namely that being our Constitution. And we've touched on this before, that our Constitution itself is becoming unlawful and is unlawful currently.
It is.
The adaptations of proposals that we've seen in the last several years, the proposals themselves are unlawful. And let me say this: the Constitution is not necessarily the final law. It is supposed to be the supreme law of the land, given to direct the government to its proper delegated duties. However, when that Constitution violates the law, right? We read that in Declaration of Independence, the laws of nature and of nature's God, something like Article 1, Section 28 being Prop 3, that is a direct violation of the laws of nature. I don't care if you believe in God or not. The fact that we think that we can just take a human life with no recourse of action, we got another thing coming, and that will be repaid by the people that allow it, and the people who don't stand out against it. But laws are very simple in that regard, to say that if it isn't congruent with the laws of nature, or it isn't congruent with our Constitution, or it isn't congruent with a existing law, then it cannot be. And we are not to subject ourselves under it, but it is our duty to oppose it as an unjust law. We can see that if anybody like me just goes through the Michigan compiled laws and goes through the index and just picks at random subjects and starts reading, you'll understand rapidly that we have laws that overlap prior laws, and a lot of them are contradictory to prior laws that have not been repealed that are still standing. So, and I forget which founding father says it, but when he talks about the laws becoming so voluptuous that the people are not able to understand it, that is going to be a downfall, because there is no basis for how we provide justice then. They can just make up a new law on the fly and assume that overturns every prior existing law contrary to it. That's not the case. They have to follow a proper procedure for updating laws,
Which they're not doing.
which they're not doing.
But I want to go back to, you can always go back to the Bible and God, because the precedent for what's going on is there, right there in the Bible. And the fact that God gave 10 commandments, and that wasn't good enough for everyone. They had to the Jews added 648 more laws. And it's the same mentality now. People start picking on each other, and they want to get specific because they're annoyed or whatever, instead of stay with the laws of God, defend other people's rights to be different from us. And we see it in the craziness of people that consider themselves liberal or whatever. It's like whatever title they go under in order to decide that everybody has to fit in with them, whether we agree with their opinions or not. They think that they're liberal. They think that they're open-minded, but they're some of the most closed-minded people I've ever known in my life.
Yeah, and we're told from Scripture what is the simple base of law. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Right? He says that on these two hang the entire law. Right? That's still the case. We know from Psalms 2 especially that there is no government that not of God. Right? The government is placed upon Christ's shoulders. Right? The ultimate conqueror is placed upon his shoulders, and there's no authority given to any of them except by their creator, whether that be for good or for wrath or judgment. Either or, they have that authority, and they answer solely to him for it and the people that put them there.
Right.
So when we see things like that, we have to understand that if it violates the laws of nature, right, which can be summed up in those two simple arguments, then it cannot be law. And I know there's probably somebody out there that's going to see this and say, well, you can't have, you're talking just a theology or a theocracy. And I'm saying every government is a theocracy, whether you want to see it that way or not. It's what the belief system of whoever is governing. Okay? Right. In America, we have an open theocracy for all practical purposes. We are established on the principles and the judgments of Christianity, what is found in the Scriptures. You can argue that till you're blue in the face, but if you look at how it was established, that was the basis of how the laws were created and how the government is to function. You can reference many points in the Old Testament and from history that they had gone over and said that this is the best way for people to be able to govern themselves, yet have a government willing to establish justice that the people can be saved. Right? That was the basis of all of it.
I have another question.
Uh-oh.
In that document that you were looking at for me, that MCL, it has a lot of whereas statements right off the top, and then Granholm is saying, "This is how I have the authority to do what I'm about to do." I don't think I've ever seen an MCL code with a whereas in it. Usually that's a resolution that has no authority and it's put out by a political party or a county board with something that they don't have authority for, but they're just making a statement. Have you seen that elsewhere in code law? Is that something that comes with an executive order?
Yes, this was specifically an executive order. I see what you're saying because it's stating a specific code at the top. And for those who want to look it up in the Michigan website, it's stating 324.99919. And that was the creation of the natural resources or creation of the DNR for all practical purposes.
It reads funny. It absolutely reads funny. The way that it's presented there, because I read it last night.
And the other thing that I find strange before you continue, Bill, is the one I was looking for was 324.501, which seems to have disappeared. So they got as close to 324.5 as they could with all those nines. And that was another indicator to me that they were hiding something with it. I've never seen that. I've never noticed it before. I don't know how they do codified numbering system, but it really kind of jumped out to me when I couldn't find the other, and I found that. I think that was done after, I don't know, 324.5, I'm assuming was before this. And so they, I just don't know about that. That's another thing I'm curious about. But I've seen executive orders before with Trump, but I've never seen one And I've seen Whitmer's, emergency orders and things like that. But this was kind of new to me. It was codified law, and I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't look like it went through the legislature.
That would be the question that I would have regarding it, because because a law can be established that specifically addresses only departments or agencies. Okay, they can, for instance, if the executive branch wants to say to the head of a department, if you violate this specific directive, you're going to go to jail for 5 years, right? The executive department has that ability to their principal departments and to the agencies they put in place. And that is done through executive order. However, in our Constitution, to be able to attach a legal standing to it or legal authority, it does have to go through the legislature, and they have to approve it, which is the reason why I fought so hard in 2020 when Whitmer was doing that, because the legislature wouldn't address it, and it drove me nuts that they wouldn't fulfill their duties in that regard to shut it down.
Right.
But this was one of those issues where somewhere in here, and I'd have to go through it a little bit, but somewhere in here is a legal authority that she is directing to the department to say that this has to be done, or there will be a consequence somewhere along the way, right?
Guys,
So to do that, they would have to codify it in law through the legislature, which is why it does contain an MCL number, but it is listed as an executive order.
okay, guys, I just landed, so I'm gonna take off, and you can keep going.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing the hearing coming up.
Thank you. I've got to get in there and file my media paperwork here, and then see what's going on, and then we'll. I'm going to keep this broadcast going if I can. If I'll be able to do a little bit of broadcast, that's fine. But I can listen if you guys want to keep going. You guys say a prayer, and then I'm going to head right into the courthouse. Okay.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Yeah. Continue to say prayers and be with all of us, because anybody that's fighting is really getting their tail handed to them right now. I'm going to tell you that.
Yep, that's for sure. At least there are some willing to stand up and do it.
Even if we're ornery, we're out there doing it,
Duty is ours, results are God's, John Adams said. We do all we can and leave the results to him.
You sent me a link in the chat, our private chat. Did you find that 324.5? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I've got that copied, so I will put these links out on Karen the Riveter later too.
All right. Yeah, and that was what you're talking about there, and that was the Department of Natural Resources creation then.
Okay.
So it had already existed. I'm assuming that somewhere along the way, and I'd have to look at it, but somewhere along the way they made a drastic change to it, and that's
Right.
where they're trying to derive their authority from.
Right. On the first one we were talking about with Granholm, it looks on the surface that she just changed the name to add "and environment" to Department of Natural Resources. So the public would just say, "Oh, she cares about our natural resources. Isn't that nice?" But I know there's got to be more to it.
That's the point, and they use the language to mislead people, and also the departments, And I think that after what we've been through over the last few years, we should all be able to say, hey, guess what? They're using the language in order to lead people astray. Here, I'm going to flip my camera on a minute. Guess where I am? Hillsdale. Walking. Hang on a minute. There we go. There's the courthouse, and a lot of stuff going on here. We have to go across the street here for a minute, but they're using all those things that we were taught to believe in to lead us astray. That's what's going on here, guys.
Yeah, I find it interesting at courthouse. Is that the courthouse behind you?
Courthouse. We're across the street in the courthouse.
Oh.
That's where we were last time. Usually, everybody seems to get here kind of near the end, because You know, they yesterday the information came out yesterday on the time that we were supposed to be down here. So we'll see how many people were here. Last time the courthouse was packed, and you know, I threw something out there. There was a couple people that threw something out there yesterday, but both Stephanies, or one of the Stephanies called me and said, we really need you down here, because last time I was the only one that was covering this in a non-biased way. So that's how it works, I guess. Do what we have to do.
Yep, fill the gap. Wherever there's somebody that needs to be and is requested to be there, it's worth doing. It is our duty to fill the gap where needed.
We'll see how many people are here in a minute. I can't bring my phone in without getting approved as media, so I might turn the camera off for a minute until I get the approval, and
right.
then be able to walk in with it, because there are some things in there that, of course, with people's lives that they don't want other people to see. They're private matters, and I think it's a great thing. But this one is one that affects all of us. So here, let's see what I got. I'm going to turn it off. I'll be with you in a minute.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. I mean, we've talked about that before in some Liberty Essentials early on, when we're regarded to the rights of the First Amendment, right? The right of the press. That is a right of the people to publish public information and things that are just found normally that you can see or hear. The government does not have a right or any delegated authority to restrict a person's right. Right? They didn't grant it. They can't revoke it or infringe upon it. And Thomas Jefferson, when he was writing to when Virginia was talking about religious liberty, he defined infringement as the narrowing of the operation or the repeal of a right. Right? So the fact that somebody like Donna currently would have to get permission or a permit in some regard or a license in some regard, as we talked about last week, to exercise a right is an unlawful infringement upon the people from whatever government entity she's about to walk into.
So, Bill, I noticed that you're sitting at home instead of in your truck today. Are you free to stay on the show while we observe what's going to happen in the courtroom or not?
Well, I like to do this from home because I don't like to be on my phone. It's much more comfortable, and I have all the amenities right here in front of me.
Uh-huh.
But I do have a crew that I send out on Wednesday mornings to start jobs, and then I go join with them to finish them up. So I won't be able to stay too long.
Okay,
But
that's what I'm asking before you get to that point. If you need to jump away, I'll stay on as long as Donna needs me to, and I might be just kind of sitting quietly while we listen. We'll see what happens.
yeah, I'm hoping to be here as long as it takes, at least for her to get into the building.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing to at least wait for. And that's one thing I try to do in my daily life as well. For instance, when you have multiple people and multiple vehicles going somewhere, when groups of people are about to leave, how many people do we see jump in their car, fire it up, and drive off right away? I would have to say the majority of the people I see do that. But in my mind, my conscience says I need to make sure everybody is able to leave, right? So I'm typically one of the last people to leave an event or leave a group. Even if I have to sit in the car and wait for a little bit, I want to make sure that everybody's vehicle starts and everybody is able to go forward. We saw that back in January at our meeting. We had a lady that fell and hurt herself.
Yeah.
And she was unable to drive back home. And so I happened to have my sister there, who is a National Guard medical readiness officer, and she was able to examine her right on the spot, determined it was, I forget what it was, either a broken collarbone or shoulder or something when she hit the sidewalk. So I stuck around, and I told her, I was like, if you need a driver, I'll jump in and I'll drive you home. I think she lived over by the Detroit area or Flint or somewhere out there. Like, I'll drive you home, and then I'll figure out a ride coming back. But it's those little things. It's the care and compassion it takes on individuals. That's how we show love, right?
Yeah.
Love is an action, not an emotion, and that the people, the mass amount of people don't understand that anymore, because of all the mainly TV that portrays love as this emotional connection between two individuals. And country songs are horrible about that. I don't know if you listen to country. I used to, and I had to quit. Um, but country songs are horrible about that when it talks about falling in love with somebody, and that's not what love is. You can fall into an attraction to somebody, or fall into a desire to be with somebody, but love is strictly an action, right? And you can read about that in Scripture. You go to 1 John 3:18, where it says that we ought not love in word or tongue, but in deed and truth. That is the objective of love. And you can see that from what Donna's doing right now. There's enough love there being shown that she's willing to go to these hearings and these court cases, which don't necessarily affect her in the immediate sense, but have an impact upon what we do throughout the rest of our lives, the rest of the lawful action that we take and that we've been taking over the last several years. But there's enough love that she's willing to do that and actually cover it so that other people can see it and watch it and get the facts and the details to make up their mind about what's going on.
I've been a recipient of that form of love you were talking about, where there was many a late night meetings that I've been at, and I'm often one of the last people to go too. But I really appreciated it when that other vehicle is sitting out there with their lights on, ready to go, but waiting to make sure my car starts, waiting to make sure that I'm able to pull out of that parking lot. And especially when there's a long way to go or it's in an unfamiliar neighborhood, that is a real assurance.
Yeah, it's just little simple things like that. And I don't know if that was probably just ingrained into me through my father, because that's what I watched him do all the time too. But it's just a knowledge that is passed down that I choose to exercise, because we have to. We have to take care of each other here. We were talking about that before. The small percentage of people that were willing to stand up and make the difference back in the war for independence. That was what that was premised on. It was each individual not only caring for themselves and their family, but caring enough of their community to stand up and say, yeah, there's a need. I'll be the one to fill that need. And if there's a need in a group that nobody else is willing to fill, and you ask me to fill it, whether or not I know how to do it's pretty much irrelevant. I may tell you that it may end up in complete failure, but I'm willing to fill the gap, because if nobody does, then nothing will be done. Right? And that should be the motive of each and every one of us, to stand in the gap, to be the repairs of the breach, as I think Isaiah said it. And that was one of the things I was going to touch on regarding unity. If we're going to stand in unity, look at what Nehemiah had done in the Old Testament when they were in captivity and realized that his city was broken down and burned up, and the sorrow that fell upon him there. He was asked by the king, "What's going on? Why are you sorrowful in the king's presence?" Which could be punishable by death at that time, right? As the king's cupbearer, he was kind of the one that had to keep the energy in the room up. But upon telling the king the issue as to why his sorrow was on his face, the king granted him leave, and he took not only himself but those who were willing to go to repair the walls of his city and set it back up and build it back up, so that they may have a home in the future to go back to, right? Because the promise was still in effect at that time that they were the inheritors of that land. So when you look at all of what was going on and the opposition that befell him from the other local nations and the leaders, and them trying to come in and just sabotage all the effort that was put in by the people there, what did the people do? not only were they working, they had one hand working, putting up bricks and pillars and doors and doing all sorts of artwork with metals and stones. But in the other hand, they held the sword or a spear, right? They were not only rebuilding the gap of their homeland, but they were standing in the gap from any enemy forces that were going to come in and try to sabotage the work. And as much as we can put our hands to the plow and move forward, we also need to be willing to hold that spear, to hold the sword or the shield, and protect those around us that are doing the same thing. Because otherwise, they're going to take us out one at a time. They don't need to eliminate the mass amount of people that are trying to put forth the effort into restoring this nation. They only need to take them one out at a time and discourage the rest of them from proceeding, right? That is the reason why we need to be willing to stand in the gap for our brothers and sisters.
And another point to be made there is that the people learned about and worshiped God at that time. And that is one of the problems that we have in our nation. And we won't resolve anything. And I know you know this, you've been talking about it before. We won't solve any problems, as Donna was really hitting hard in the first part of the show, if we don't return to God as a nation. And there's always been a small number of people who have, and a lot of other people, even there might be one generation that does everything right and the very next generation does everything wrong. It can turn that quickly. So things might go perfectly well with your children, and then but within one generation, if they don't learn from the consequences, and if they move away from God again, there are going to be more consequences. And it doesn't matter what we do about the Constitution and the earthly government that we have. If we're not following our spiritual governor, our creator, then none of it will matter.
Yeah. What one generation tolerates, the next will accept.
Yeah.
Right? That is the way it goes. Did you know, Karen, regarding that, since you brought it up, and the people listening might not know this, but if you look up in Michigan compiled laws, and you look up 750.102, it is still a misdemeanor crime in Michigan to blaspheme the name of our holy God.
Wow.
Most people don't know that. But that was put in 1931, almost 50 years after the foundation of the state. Right?
Yep.
That was before 1963 when we established our Constitution, our latest Constitution, and added the preamble that we the people grateful to Almighty God.
Yeah.
The 1808 did not have that in there. But that's one of the things. And
1908. 1908.
Yep, that's what I meant.
Well, we weren't a state in 1808, but I figured I knew what you meant. But
yeah, the Northwest ordinances were still under play there.
We didn't technically establish 1863, but we pretend anyway, and I do appreciate that preamble. And there you go, talking about these MCLs that some might consider outdated. And yet that one survives, and it's still apparently visible in the record.
Yep. There was one, when I was talking about the repealing of them and not being able to find them, there was one in particular that I was trying to find a couple of years ago that had existed probably 5 or 6 years ago that I remember. And that was that it was a misdemeanor crime to cuss or swear in front of women or children in the state of Michigan. About 6 years ago, that was still a crime. Yeah. And that law was repealed. And I am curious why.
Right.
Because now it's just blatant. We were out in public yesterday at a restaurant, and there was a group that sat down. We were the only ones in the restaurant at the time for lunch. And there was a group that sat down, and I mean, the first 5 minutes of the conversation was nothing but GD this and F that and all sorts of filthy language coming out of their mouth. And when the waitress came over, I'm not one to shut up. Those who may know me, I can hold my tongue for a little while, but eventually it gets to the point where something's going to be said. And if nobody else is saying it, I'm going to be the one to say it. And so it came to that point where the waitress came over and said, "How are you doing? Is there anything else you need?" And I says, "Yeah, we need some peace and quiet over here because I come to a family restaurant and I don't need to be hearing this filthy garbage coming out of people's mouths." And I said it loud enough for them to hear it. And it was only 30 seconds after that, there was not another word spoken at that table. Right? It only takes somebody willing to stand up and say something about it or to do something about it, and the results will be blessed according to it. Right?
Another way to do that too could be to, if you don't have it memorized, as I usually don't, I may have a clue where I'll find it or the words that I'm looking for. But there's a few scriptures about the tongue, and my husband says James 3. So there's a few scriptures that have to do with the tongue that could be used. So it's not you speaking your opinion. Some people take that a little bit easier because how can they talk back to you if they call themselves a Christian and you're quoting scripture?
Yeah, the one I think your husband was mentioning there in James 3 was the tongue is a wildfire, a world of iniquity. It setteth on fire the course of nature and is set on fire of hell. Right? Whoso can tameth the tongue can tame. Paraphrasing here. Whoso can tameth his tongue and tame his whole body. Right? And even Christ was talking about that in the New Testament, where he talks about it's not what goeth into a man that defileth him, but what cometh out will defile a man, because out of the mouth the heart speaks. No, out of the heart the mouth speaks. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Right? Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. So what comes out of a person, you can tell what's inside of them. And when you bring stuff like that up, it allows for that conviction to come upon them. Right? I'm not going to hold it back. In my opinion, it is still a crime to utter such nonsense in front of my wife or my children. Or as we see, even the public display of, and these laws are still out there. We went through a couple of them a couple of months ago regarding the display of obscene material or the display of profanity. Those are still in Michigan. Those are still on the books. And very rarely can you find somebody that's even willing to talk about executing those laws or talk about upholding them. But some of the nonsense you see on just billboards or on the sides of buildings, it's incredible today how far we've got. The founding fathers wouldn't have tolerated that, right? That would have been just torn down on the spot. They wouldn't have asked permission to do it. They would have just tore it down. And we can see some of that happening. Went in to tear down the statue of Baphomet.
Yeah. Breaking up.
Yep, there we go.
Come back, Bill.
It's in and out right now, Karen.
Yeah, I can
why.
hear you. When your screen freezes up, I'm still hearing you.
Okay. So, do you remember which state it was that had the man go in there and destroy that statue of Baphomet that they put up in the Capitol? Just recently, I think it was just last year. The guy did that. Yeah. I applaud him for it. You know, he took the action. He did something that our fathers would have done and wouldn't have hesitated to do.
Yep.
And I could only hope by the grace of God that I would have the inner fortitude to do such a thing, right? Notwithstanding the consequences. And I would hope that all of those who I call a friend would be willing to do the same. I don't know about you, Karen. My friends list is getting shorter over the years. And those who I legitimately call friends. I think there's 3 or 4 that I could honestly say if I called and needed something that they would stand with me and do it.
Yeah.
And that may be pushing the limit. But it is those people that I want to be around. And it is those people I know if I get out of line that they will correct me and tell me the truth regarding it. I don't need somebody to be around me that can agree with me all the time. Um, in fact, I don't want it, right? What I believe I'm saying is true. If you're just agreeing with me, you're just adding to it. But I want people that maybe know a little bit more, a little bit deeper into what I'm talking about to be able to say, no, you're not quite right, or no, we need to correct that issue a little bit. And Karen, you're one of those, doggone it. You've caught me. You've caught me a couple of times, whether in meetings or on the show. That is what we want, because iron sharpens iron.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Yep. If we're expecting to take our axe and go out and pound in the dirt trying to get roots out, what's going to happen? Right? The axe is going to get dull. Okay, we can pound on dirt all we want, but the dirt's not going to hear. The dirt's not going to listen. It's just going to kind of move out of the way and let you do it. But in the meantime, you're going to dull your axe up. So what you have to do is take your axe over to the grinding wheel once in a while, and strip a little bit off it, clean it up, sharpen it up, take the burrs out, so that we can get out there and start hitting the trees again. Right? That is the same principle that it is within the body of Christ, the Christians, the church, that we need to be not attacking, but we need to be reproving each other and taking those burrs off and sharpening that edge so that all of us in unity can be all saying the same thing.
With love.
That way there's no confusion. Yep. Saying the same thing in love.
That's been a key for me. That's another big lesson in this last several months, year, is that there are people who have had their minds sharpened, but now they come out too sharp in a way where when they speak to other people to correct them about a matter or try to lead them, it comes out in a sharp way. And then what you have is what I call ego mind instead of heart mind. If you're thinking about helping someone with an act of kindness and love, then might get a little noisy here in a second. Then you'll be able to sharpen that tool in your friend without offense and get the lesson done that needs to be done, and then move forward together. If you speak because you think you are better than the other person, or you know better than the other person, and they are XYZ, foolish, lazy, whatever it is, and you're speaking with that in your mind, like you said, with your heart, what comes out of your mind, of your mouth, is not going to be helpful to the other person or to you or to anybody else. And I've seen a lot of that lately, where people are trying to learn and then they get frustrated with other people not being in the same place. And I admit I can do that sometimes. I spent 7 years as a Toastmaster. I learned how to speak in front of people. I learned how to teach classes. And when I was in that authoritative position of my class, I was a dog trainer for a time. And when I was in front of a class, I had dogs in there that would bite each other or people. And what I said goes in that environment. And that became somewhat of an exercise of the ego out of necessity. But it doesn't work in personal relationships. So in other circumstances, I've had to learn not to be so sharp, not to be so intense, I should say. If you speak in love, you can do that more readily. And you have an easygoing nature about you where you will say things with authority, and yet you don't do it with a harsh negative intensity. That's my read on you from meeting you a couple times in person and seeing you online. I think you have that good balance, and I think your kids are going to come out of it well-balanced individuals and adults as a result.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it. The the whole idea behind that is we're nothing but dirt, right?
Hmm.
Each one of us is nothing but dirt, and we may be more oil soaked than the guy next to us, but we're still the same dirt. And when you look at it that way, you understand that I am no better than anybody, and nobody is better than me, right? But we all can learn something from each other.
Ashes to ashes.
That's right.
Dirt. It works.
And
But you're right.
to think about it further, um, to think that we are just we are just a pile of dirt that is formed up and given life, and to think that us as dirt can defy the living God, the Creator,
Hmm.
brings a whole new light into how far and how degenerate humanity, or not degenerate, could be, but how depraved humanity is uh, from even knowing what's right.
Hmm.
Right? The creature from the dirt would defy the Almighty God, and we've all been there. We're all living proof of that. But I would hope each one of us has a testimony behind us as to how we are given that life back. And someday I'll have to do that on the show. That would be kind of fun. But it is nothing that we can do that will allow us to move forward and take action. The only reason I do what I do is based on what's been given to me, what's inside of me,
Hmm.
and I do it for my kids, for your kids, for the posterity of the nation, and the security of the nation is the only reason why I do what I do. Right? We've been given this under God, and if we have that spirit, every one of us should be in this fight, because
Hmm.
what God has given us, we are to be stewards of. And if we're not being stewards of it, if we're not providing for our own, like in 1 Timothy 5:8, if we're not providing for our own or our posterity, those are my words, then we have denied that faith and are
Hmm.
worse than an infidel to our brothers and sisters.
Hmm. We've been studying in our church about from Ecclesiastes, and one of the main lessons in there in the first several chapters is that you can't take it with you when you go. Well, what you are allowed to do and welcome to do is to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And so you speak of future generations, and I know you're not speaking of it purely in an earthly sense, because what does that matter? They're dirt, right? But can they get closer to God? Are you going to set them up so that your kids, I don't have kids, so that your kids are able to worship Him throughout their lives as they feel is best based on God's Word? And can I help you and your children do that? I don't have kids, but I care about other people's kids. Because if I didn't, what am I here for? God put me here for a purpose too. And can I help other people become and remain in the presence of God? That's what we're all supposed to be doing. I've mentioned probably on Donna's show before, one of the things that occurred in studying for me some time ago, and it to me is one of the best lessons. When you look at Christ and what he said in the garden and what he said on the cross, to me, it reflects all the way back to Cain in chapter 4, I believe, of Genesis. When Cain's got caught and he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" He's killed his brother, and God knows. His blood speaks to me from the ground. God's the first CSI. He knows everything, but he's telling him the evidence of it is right there. I can see what you did, Cain. And he tells Cain about his punishment. And most people focus on a mark being placed on Cain. What does that mean? What does the mark on him mean so that other people won't kill him? But I don't think that's the big point in that scripture. If you read it carefully, when God says, "I'm going to remove you from the garden," Cain says, "That is more than I can bear." I don't think he's worried about other people killing him. I think he's afraid of leaving the presence of God. Because they've been in the Garden of Eden. They've been in the presence of God. And for the first time in his life, he's getting thrown out of that presence. And he does not like that idea. He's horrified by it. And so when you read about Christ in the garden and how he is so concerned, I think a lot of people believe that he's concerned about being whipped, having a crown of thorns on his head, and being nailed to the cross and all of that suffering physically. I don't think he was very worried about that. I think he knew about it, expected it. It wasn't going to be fun. But when he says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" How could he take on the sins of the world without leaving the presence of God? He had to do that. In order to defeat death, he had to become death. He had to take on sin, and you can't be in the presence of God and live in sin or have sin with you. And Jesus took on that sin. When he said, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" it was because he was no longer in the presence of God. And I think he knew that was coming, and that's what he was stressed about. And of course, he came back, but he had to be that greatest sacrifice for us. And so therefore, when people deliberately place themselves outside of the presence of God by living in sin, that is something I think they forget, they don't comprehend, or they don't care. And when I think of Cain and I think of Christ and how horrified they were of that very thought, that is something that should rock our world and remind us where we need to be and what that means for our lives. And all of this earthly concern that we have and fear based on, is there going to be another pandemic? Is there going to be a nuclear war? Who cares? Are you in the presence of God? Do you want to stay there?
Yeah, that is the huge key right there that you mentioned. And specifically regarding Cain, immediately after that, it refers to Cain and his children as the sons of men.
Yeah.
They were removed from God's authority over, well, not God's authority over them, but they were removed from his presence and his blessing over them because of that. And I don't think people realize we use the cross often to refer to the sin payment, right? The blessing of God being able to redeem us back to Himself. But I think what a lot of people miss is when you look at it and to understand that everything I have done was placed on Him at that very moment. All of the wrath that took place there, the mocking, scornings, beatings, the disrespect, the crown of thorns, the nails, the hanging, the starvation of air, everything that went on was the wrath of God that I deserved. Right, that
Mm-hmm.
was mine to bear, and He took it in my place.
Mm-hmm.
That if we miss that point and see that that the wrath of God abides on the children of disobedience, and just look at it as, well, yep, it was just wiped clean right there, and we can move forward. Then we're missing it, and that's oftentimes why people get caught up in the same sins that have plagued them. Right?
Mhm.
They're pet sins, so they call them. And whether that be, you still see fornication and adultery in the churches that aren't being addressed. You still see idolatry going on, whether it be things, work, your own family, politics, people, amongst other things. You still see people lying, cheating, and stealing. It's those little things. If you don't understand that the wrath that happened on the cross is the exact same wrath that is deserved for each and every one of those little sins, then we miss the point and we miss the cross.
Mhm.
It is on there that the wrath abode and that redemption and the atonement was met and paid.
Mhm. And it's timeless. Wasn't just for the people at that time. It wasn't for a generation ago. It was for our generation and the future generations too. It's timeless. Covers everybody.
That's right.
So if you got to watch a movie with a famous actor, wasn't it Jim Caviezel did it once? To pretend to be like Jesus, to put it in a visual form for people to imagine what that was like. For me, a better one was Braveheart. In the scene where Mel Gibson is William Wallace and he's laying on the table being tortured, and his friends are watching, and his friends are just, their hearts are being torn up, and they're going, "Mercy, William." I think of the disciples by looking at that scene and what it must have been like for them, and what kind of energy they had moving forward because they were direct witnesses. We don't have that firsthand knowledge, so it's easy for us to see it as a story. But it really happened. It really happened to our brother. And as children of God, we are brothers and sisters of Christ. And we have to be able to see that. I used to think, I thought a lot about David, and I feel a kinship with David. And sometimes I feel a kinship with Moses. But David wasn't perfect, and neither was Moses. But David's a fascinating personality, and he's a character in the stories, But he was a real man. And I hope to meet him someday, because he still lives, in a sense. We don't think of the departed as being real living souls, but we should. When someone dies, we start talking about them in past tense, and I've been thinking about that recently. We should stop doing that. If we know they're a Christian and we believe they're in heaven, that's present tense. They're just in a different place. They're still
Yeah.
our brothers and sisters. So, it's just
Yeah.
a temporary departure.
Dead should be a verb, not an adjective.
Yes.
All right. It's what happened. It's not the current state of being. Well, it is for some, but it's not the current state of being for those. So,
Yes.
well, I'm not sure Donna's going to come back here.
I don't know, but she's still got the show live.
And I'll look for her video here in a little while. But is there anything else that we ought to talk about before we go?
Well, I don't know what happens if we just leave the show.
Well, I think there is
That's
an IT
never
guy
happened
on.
before.
I think there is an IT guy on the back end. We were listening to that discussion right before the show started, since Donna was on the road.
Uh-huh.
So I think he'll shut it down for us. I hope. I'll probably
Okay.
send him a message just to make sure. But
Well,
yeah,
maybe Maybe we should definitely say a prayer because she was making that suggestion and we missed that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Why don't we pray for them in the situation that's going on? So, all right, I'll go ahead. Father, again, we come to you, and it's just the two of us here, Father. But I know there's hundreds and thousands that are watching or will be watching. And Father, I ask that you continue your blessings upon these actions, Father. That you would continue to guide and direct everything that out and about, Father, doing some more work, supporting those who are in the fight, Father, not just for liberty but for justice, and calling out those who are not. And day by day, hour by hour, as we go on through the rest of this day and this week, Father, I ask that you would be with those that are listening or watching later on as well. Father, I ask that this show be a blessing to you alone. We seek no glory of our own in it, and I ask that you would use it to further your kingdom alone. Father, give us strength and courage to stand in the gap in the midst of trials. Give us the motivation, Father, the knowledge, the wisdom to make it through each one. And we ask your blessings on these. In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesus' name, amen. And we pray for Donna's daughter today too, and that things can go well at home with all that situation. But I was thinking when I was researching this DNR thing, if Donna is successful with her not conceding as the greatest governor's candidate who is not conceded in the history of not conceding. She has to say that once a show. She's not here, so I'll say it for her. Well, if she's successful and she falls in line as the governor, I think one of her first acts would be to fire that department head, the director. And personally, I know there's a lot because of my history in biology and inner workings of some DNR from that perspective. I was an employee of the Indiana DNR for a little while. It was a great job, but it was before I knew anything about the politics and all of it. But I think it would be great to have the people who research and protect the natural resources of the state to be able to do that in some way, but they have to do it in a lawful way. And in the meantime, I would be totally fine with Donna Brandenburg firing the director of that department, who was appointed by previous governors. Way. So I hope that Donna is able to do that someday. Your screen froze up again. Well, before we leave, we'll say what Donna always says. God bless you, God bless those you love, and God bless America. I think I got that right.
Yep, that's right. We'll see you again next week, Karen, if not sooner.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, I thought I'd jump right back on again. We just got out of the hearing, and we weren't allowed to go in. Here's all wind blowing here a little bit, but we were not allowed to go into the courtroom today. But they rescheduled. It was more of a scheduling hearing, so I thought I'd just jump on because I'm of course I'm out in the field, so I couldn't shut it off very much. But I just want to say, God bless you all. Things are going in a good direction. They're going to get Nessel and Benson on the stand, and it's going to be epic. So have a great day, and God bless you all.